Enemy Pie. Written by Derek Munson. Illustrated by Tara Callahan King. Read by Ed Harris. It should have been a perfect summer. My dad helped me build a treehouse in our backyard. And I was on the best baseball team in town. It was all good until Jeremy Ross moved into the neighborhood. I did not like Jeremy Ross. He laughed at me when he struck me out in a baseball game. He had a party on his trampoline, and I wasn't even invited. Jeremy Ross was the one and only person on my enemy list. I hung it up in my treehouse where Jeremy Ross was not allowed to go. Dad understood stuff like enemies. He told me that when he was my age, he had enemies too. But he knew of a way to get rid of them. Enemy pie, he said. The recipe was so secret, he couldn't even tell me. I will tell you this, he said. Enemy pie is the fastest known way to get rid of enemies. What kinds of things, disgusting things, would I put into a pie for an enemy? I brought Dad some weeds from the garden, but he just shook his head. I brought him earthworms and rocks, but he didn't think he'd need those. I gave him the gum I'd been chewing on all morning. He gave it right back to me. I went out to play, but when I was in the backyard looking for ladybugs, I smelled something really good. Enemy pie shouldn't smell this good. If enemy pie smelled bad, your enemy would never eat it, he said. But still, I wasn't really sure how this enemy pie worked. What exactly did it do to enemies? Maybe it made their hair fall out, or their breath stinky. Maybe it made bullies cry. While the pie cooled, Dad filled me in on my job. There is one part of enemy pie that I can't do. In order for it to work, you need to spend a day with your enemy. Even worse, you have to be nice to him. It's not easy, but that's the only way that enemy pie can work. I rode my bike to his house and knocked on the door. When Jeremy opened the door, he seemed surprised. He stood on the other side of the screen door and looked at me. "Can you play?" I asked. "I'll go ask my mom," he said. He came back with his shoes in his hand. We rode bikes for a while, and Jeremy's mom made us lunch, and after lunch, we went over to my house. The first thing Jeremy noticed was my tree house. My tree house was my tree house. I was the boss. "Can we go in it?" he asked. I knew he was going to ask me that. But he was the top person, the only person on my enemy list. And enemies aren't allowed in my treehouse. But he wasn't being a very good enemy. "Okay," I said. But hold on. I climbed up ahead of him and tore the enemy list off the wall. I had a checkerboard and some cards in the treehouse, and we played games until my dad called us down for dinner.
"Time for dinner, boys."
I was beginning to think that maybe we should just forget about enemy pie. But sure enough, after dinner, Dad brought out the pie. "Wow," Jeremy said, looking at the pie. "My dad never makes pies like this." It was at this point that I panicked. I didn't want Jeremy to eat enemy pie. He was my friend. I couldn't let him eat it. "Jeremy, don't eat it. It's bad pie. I think it's poisonous or something." "If it's so bad," Jeremy asked, "then why has your dad already eaten half of it?" Sure enough, he was eating enemy pie. "Good stuff," he mumbled through a mouthful. Enemy pie was delicious. After dessert, Jeremy rode his bike home, but not before inviting me over to play on his trampoline in the morning. He said he'd teach me how to flip. As for enemy pie, I still wonder if enemies really do hate it But I don't know if I'll ever get an answer, because I just lost my best enemy.